I woke up coughing, my chest tight as if stuffed with rags. The air smelled of medicinal herbs and beeswax. This was not my bed. I lay in a vast, carved four-poster draped in heavy silk, a monument to archaic wealth. Dread pooled in my stomach as the memories descended. I had transmigrated, not into a heroine or a warrior, but into Ilara, a sickly, cannon-fodder princess from a tawdry fantasy novel I'd once skimmed. Perfect. In the story, Ilara is a footnote, a frail royal disposed of in a power struggle by the cold, ambitious General Silas. The real narrative belongs to my sister, Celeste, a reincarnated woman trying to rewrite her tragic romance with Silas, only to become ensnared in deeper betrayal. Ilara? She's collateral damage, cut down by Silas's soldiers. Not a promising legacy. I pushed myself up, my new body protesting with aches. This princess was a collection of maladies, just like my old self, prone to fainting, always one chill from death's door. But I refused to die for a plot I never chose. The solution was clear. Avoid Silas and Celeste's drama entirely. No palace schemes, no romantic entanglements, just quiet survival. Then I remembered the novel's pivotal turn. Celeste, heartbroken by Silas's indifference, volunteers to marry the emperor of the rival kingdom of Valthorn to escape her pain. In the original tale, it is Isolde, Silas's secret love, who is sent away. Celeste's intervention changes that. It was my escape route. If I could volunteer first, I could be gone from Aethelgard before Silas's blades found me. I dragged myself from the bed, ignoring the dizziness. My plan was simple. Offer myself for the political marriage before Celeste could. Valthorn was distant, and its emperor, Chaol, was rumored to be severe but just. The book said little about him, meaning fewer plot traps. And, crucially, I was gay. Marrying a man held no personal conflict for me. It was purely a strategic exit. The council chamber hummed with tension when I entered, leaning on a maidservant's arm. Celeste stood near our father's throne, pale but resolute. King Alistair sat rigid, his crown glinting in the torchlight. Nobles whispered, eyeing my sister as if she were a strange creature. She opened her mouth to speak, but I was faster. "Father," I said, my voice a reedy rasp that nonetheless cut through the murmurs, "send me to Valthorn. Let me marry their emperor." Celeste's jaw slackened, the king's brows shot toward his hairline. The assembled courtiers gasped as one. "Ilara, you can't," Celeste said, stepping toward me. "Your health won't fare any worse in Valthorn," I finished, offering a frail smile. "I'm already a walking ghost. I might as well haunt a new palace." King Alistair frowned, fingers drumming on the arm of his throne. "Daughter, the Emperor of Valthorn is said to be unyielding. You are not strong enough for their northern climate, let alone their court." I shrugged, leaning more heavily on the maidservant. "Unyielding is fine. I appreciate a man with resolute. Besides, I'm not here to lead charges. Let me do this for Aethelgard." Celeste gripped my arm, her eyes wide with alarm. "Ilara, you don't understand. Chaol is brutal. What if he—" "What, punishes me?" I managed a weak chuckle, patting her hand. "He'd have to catch me first, and I'm surprisingly elusive for someone who swoons in a stiff breeze." The room held its breath. I felt the weight of their skepticism, but I stood my ground. This was my only path. Celeste's lips parted, but I shot her a look, pleading and stubborn. She knew me well enough to see my resolve. "Father," I pressed, turning back to the king, "I am serious. Send me. I may be of little use here, but I can secure this alliance, and you know I have no interest in princes." I let the implication hang. Aethelgard was tolerant, but it was still bold to state it out loud. The king's stern expression softened, just a fraction. "You are certain, Ilara?" "As certain as I am that I'll cough my lungs up before supper," I said, drawing a few stifled laughs from the nobles. Celeste's shoulders slumped in defeat. She didn't protest again. The king sighed, rubbing his temples. "Very well. You shall go to Valthorn as our pledge. Preparations will begin at once." After the council dispersed, Celeste pulled me aside, her grip tight. "You are insane," she whispered. "Why?" "To live," I said simply, squeezing her hand in return. "You have your second chance, sister. Allow me to have mine." She searched my face, then pulled me into a careful hug. "Just do not die on me, promise?" "No promises," I teased, but my chest constricted. I wasn't just fleeing Silas, I was betting my life on a stranger. The book offered only shadows. Cale was ruthless, a stabilizer after a bloody succession. He might see me as a useful token, or he might discard me without a thought. The journey to Valthorn was set for the following week. Servants packed my belongings, mostly tonics and warm cloaks, as I braced for the unknown. Cale's court would be perilous, but no more so than an arrow in the back. I'd charm my way through, or at least feint strategically. Lying in bed that night, coughing into a handkerchief, I wondered about Emperor Cale. The book painted him in broad, grim strokes. Would he be as cold as Silas? I shoved the thought aside. Worrying was pointless. My choice was made. "Valthorn," I muttered, pulling the blankets close. "I hope you are ready for a princess who is allergic to everything, including destiny." The carriage ride to Valthorn was a special kind of torment. Every jolt rattled my bones, and by the time we reached the stark stone capital, I was a shivering, coughing wraith. Servants whisked me into the palace, scrubbing and dressing me in lavish red and gold bridal silks. I barely recognized the pallid woman in the mirror. They ushered me into Emperor Cale's private chambers and left me on the edge of an enormous bed, my heart drumming a frantic rhythm. My stomach growled fiercely. No one had mentioned skipping supper for this wedding night. The room was silent save for the fire's crackle. I eyed a tray of pastries on a side table, but dared not move. What if Cale entered and found me with my mouth full? A terrible first impression. My vision began to swim, hands trembling. Low blood sugar. Of course. Cale was late, or perhaps he would not come at all. The book's silence on him was unnerving. Then, heavy, deliberate steps. The door swung open. I froze, squinting through a gathering haze. A tall figure filled the doorway, broad-shouldered, moving with an authority that claimed the very air. Cale.
"Lift the veil," he commanded, his voice a low rumble that vibrated in my ears. I fumbled with the ornate headpiece, pulling it off. "My thanks for the audience, Your Majesty," I croaked, aiming for grace. Then my body betrayed me. The act of standing sent the world tilting, and darkness swallowed my sight. I collapsed to the floor with a dull thud, vaguely aware of Kael's boots approaching. Panic flared. Was this seen as an attack? A sabotage? I clawed toward the pastry table, gasping, "Majesty, sugar, I need sugar." A beat of silence, then a sharp, "What?" "Low blood sugar," I wheezed, seizing a flaky almond cake and shoving it into my mouth. It was crumbly and sweet. I chewed desperately, praying for clarity. Kael's shadow fell over me. "You eat off the floor like a starved hound," he observed, tone drier than dust. "Is this Athelgard's idea of a princess?" I swallowed, my cheeks burning. "Apologies, Majesty. Low blood sugar is a petty tyrant. It ruins my regal composure." He did not laugh, but he did not call the guards either. Instead, he gripped my collar and hauled me onto a chair as if I weighed nothing. Strong hands, a stronger demeanor. I clutched the cake, nibbling more slowly as my head cleared. Kael stood, arms crossed, scrutinizing me as if I were a flawed manuscript. "Let me guess," I ventured, forcing a grin. "You are wondering why Athelgard sent you a half-dead bride?" "The thought had crossed my mind," he replied, his gaze cool but not cruel. His eyes, dark and sharp, scanned me from head to toe. "You look as if a stiff breeze would scatter you." "An accurate assessment," I said, finishing the cake, "but I am tougher than I appear. I promise not to faint again. Probably." He snorted, a sound that could have been disdain or amusement. "Stay there," he ordered, then called for a physician. The elderly man who arrived took my pulse and began muttering about deficient vitality and weak constitutions. I nodded along. Yes, that sounds correct. A walking compendium of ailments. Fatigue, chills, fainting spells. Her condition is delicate. She requires consistent care, rest, and specific tonics. Kael's jaw tightened, but he nodded. Draft a regimen, now. Once we were alone again, I shifted under his piercing stare. So, I said, striving for casualness, might I have another pastry for, medicinal stability? He raised a brow, then pushed the tray toward me. Eat, do not perish in my chambers. I took another cake, smiling weakly. You are kinder than the rumors suggest, Majesty. He raised a brow. Rumors exaggerate, but do not test me. Noted. I ate slowly, steadying him now that my sight had steadied. Kael was younger than I'd imagined, perhaps in his late 20s, with sharp cheekbones and a jaw that could cut stone. His dark hair was tied back, and his simple black tunic spoke of power, not pageantry. What is the arrangement, then? I asked, brushing crumbs from my fingers. You married me for peace. I am not here to cause trouble. His lips twitched, almost a smile. Peace, yes. Trouble? That remains to be seen. I laughed softly. Fair. Just do not toss me in a dungeon. I would likely catch a chill. No dungeons, he said, his voice softening a hair. But do not expect me to carry you everywhere. Deal, I agreed, though my heart still fluttered. Kael was not the monster from Whispers, but he was no soft touch either. I would need to be clever, charming, useful. As he turned to leave, I called out, Thank you, Majesty, for not having me dragged away when I collapsed. He paused, glancing back. Do not make it a habit. I sank back into the chair. Step 1, do not die. Step 2, learn to survive this man's sharp gaze and sharper tongue. Something told me it would not be simple. Morning light had scarcely penetrated the heavy drapes when a servant awoke me for Emperor Kael's summons. I groaned, every muscle aching, and dressed in a simple gown before shuffling to his study. He sat behind a vast desk, his pen moving with brutal efficiency across parchment. Without looking up, he pointed to an inkstone. Grind ink. I blinked. Of course, Majesty. I took the inkstick and began the slow, circular grind. My hands trembled slightly, but I managed. The room was quiet, save for the scrape of stone and the scratch of his pen. I stole glances, wondering at his motive. You are slow, he remarked, still not looking up. Quality requires patience, I replied, keeping my tone light. This ink shall be a masterpiece. He snorted, finally glancing at me. If your ink is as faint as your spirit, I shall have to procure better. My ego is as fragile as my health, Majesty. Have mercy. His lips twitched. He pointed to a spot by his desk. Stand there. Do not faint. I leaned against the sturdy wood, grateful for the support. My head felt light, but I would not admit it. I watched him work, his focus absolute. The external skirmishes with the eastern clans, what is your view? He said, setting down his pen. My stomach dropped. A political test? My expertise was in avoidance, not strategy. Valthorn is strong, I stalled. We don't start conflicts, but we end them decisively. He raised a brow. We? I grinned. I was born in Athelgard, but my loyalty is here now. I must champion my new home. Convenient, he said, dryly. And if Athelgard provoked trouble? I shrugged. Discourse before swords. No one benefits from war. In truth, I had no idea. The novel ignored such details. I was not about to play strategy games with a master. Kael studied me, his gaze dissecting. You are not entirely useless, he stated finally. High praise. I shall have it engraved, not entirely useless. He did not laugh, but his eyes softened a fraction. I counted it a victory. The morning passed with me hovering, grinding more ink, fetching scrolls. By noon, exhaustion pulled at me, and a cough threatened. Kael noticed. You are wheezing."
"I am not," I lied, swallowing the tickle in my throat. "Merely practicing my impression of a tea kettle." He stood, crossed the room, and took a heavy cloak from a chair. Before I could protest, he draped it over my shoulders, his hands briefly brushing my arms. "Wear this. You tremble like an aspen leaf." I froze, startled by the gesture. "I am fine. You are not." The cloak was warm, lined with fur, and carried the faint, clean scent of pine and winter air, his scent. My cheeks warmed. "Do not grow accustomed to it," he said, returning to his desk. "I merely prefer you not collapse in my study. It is bad for morale." I laughed, pulling the cloak tighter. "Noted. I shall reserve my fainting for the bedchamber." His pen halted. He shot me a look that was both amused and warning. "Careful, Alara." My face flushed, and I busied myself with the inkstone. Flirting with an emperor was bold, but I was still breathing. Later he dismissed me to rest, but summoned me again at dusk to the gardens. I found him by a stone bench, the fading light gilding his profile. I sat, still wrapped in his cloak. "You are coughing again," he observed, his tone flat. "It is my signature talent," I said, forcing a smile. "Keeps life interesting." He did not smile. He produced another, softer wrap and draped it over my knees. "Be silent. You aggravate it." I opened my mouth to retort, but a cough broke free. Chastised, I leaned back, letting the fabrics envelop me. He stared ahead, his jaw set, as if pondering a complex equation. "Thank you," I said quietly, "for the cloaks, and for not casting out this human calamity." He glanced at me, his expression inscrutable. "You are not a calamity, yet. Give it time." "I am full of surprises," I promised. For the first time he chuckled, a low, rough sound that warmed me more than the cloaks. Perhaps surviving Valthorn would not be so terrible after all. The thunder of hooves echoed across the autumn hunting grounds, the air crisp with pine and fallen leaves. Nobles in furs mingled, banners snapping in the wind. Emperor Kale looked like a deity of war in his black riding leathers, embroidered with silver wolves. I was bundled in a heavily embroidered gown, feeling ornamental and frail. Every joint ached, but I was determined to witness this. "You are not hunting," Kale stated, striding over. "You would not last to knock an arrow." I pouted, leaning on a fence post. "Allow me to observe, Majesty. I shall provide moral support." He assessed me, then sighed. "Very well, but you stay at my side. Do not wander." I grinned. "Your dedicated cheerleader at your service." He swung onto a formidable black stallion, then extended a hand to me. "Up." I stared. "With you?" "Unless you prefer to walk, which you cannot." His voice held no room for debate. I took his hand. He pulled me up effortlessly, settling me before him in the saddle. His arm encircled my waist, firm and secure. I stiffened, acutely aware of his chest against my back, the scent of leather and cold air that clung to him. "Relax," he murmured. "You are tenser than the bowstring." "Easy for you to say," I shot back, gripping the saddle. "You're the one sharing a horse with an emperor who could break you in two." He chuckled, the sound vibrating against my spine. Flattering, but I would rather not explain a broken bride. The hunt was a blur of speed and lethal precision. Kale's arrows never missed. I played my part, calling out, "Magnificent!" and "A flawless shot." He acknowledged none of it, but I caught the faintest curl of his lips once. The horse's gait, however, was merciless. By midday, my inner thighs were chafed raw, the fabric rubbing the skin to a burning sting. I bit my lip, determined not to complain. Kale slowed the horse, his gaze sharp. "You are fidgeting. What is wrong?" "Nothing." "Do not lie to me." I exhaled, defeated. "Very well, my legs protest. The saddle is unforgiving." Without another word, he guided us back to camp, dismounted, and pulled me down. My legs buckled. He caught me, one arm bracing my waist. "You are a disaster," he stated, without malice. He led me to a tent and pointed to a cot. "Sit." I obeyed, expecting him to summon a maid. Instead, he retrieved a jar of salve and knelt before me. My mind went blank. "Majesty, I can tend to it myself." "Remove the garment," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. My face flamed. "What?" "Do you wish the wounds to fester? Remove it." Mortified, I loosened my trousers just enough to reveal the red, abraded skin. Some spots were nearly bleeding. Cale's jaw tightened. "Foolish," he muttered, scooping salve. "You should have spoken sooner." "It is not so bad. It looks as if you wrestled a bear," he said, his touch surprisingly gentle as he smoothed the cool ointment over the burns. "I was your most enthusiastic supporter," I said, trying to deflect. "Admit it, my cheers secured that boar." He paused, his fingers still on my thigh, and fixed me with a look that was both amused and warning. "You are delirious." "Deliriously charming," I corrected, grinning through the sting. He finished, wiped his hands, and stood. "Rest. Do not move unless I command." Later, a servant brought a small box. "A token from His Majesty for your encouragement, Princess." Inside was a silver bracelet set with moonstones. Encouragement. I looked at Cale, who was examining a map, pretending indifference. "For my cheering?" I asked, slipping it on. He shrugged, not looking up. It was not entirely irritating. I laughed. "I shall treasure it. I must earn my keep somehow." He glanced over, his eyes glinting. "Continue, and I may not return you to Athelgard." My heart skipped. I hid it with a smile. "Careful, Majesty. I may think you enjoy my company."
He offered no reply, but the bracelet felt significant on my wrist. Perhaps he did not entirely dislike my presence. Festive music swirled through the great hall, but my spirit was heavy. The winter solstice banquet brimmed with laughter and spiced wine, but I picked at my plate, my chest tight. Earlier, a minister had boldly suggested Cale take a consort to secure a direct heir. The words had landed like a physical blow. I was his wife in name, a political seal. Could I ever be more? Cale nudged my arm. "You are quiet. Is the food displeasing?" I forced a smile. "Merely preserving my voice for your later accolades. I must uphold my title as Valthorn's premier motivator." He raised a skeptical brow. "You look as if you are attending a funeral." "Only my own," I quipped, but the jest fell flat. He frowned, his gaze searching, but the banquet ended before he could probe further. I slipped away to a secluded courtyard, needing solitude. The winter sky was brilliant with stars, mirrored by the lanterns of the city festival below. I hugged myself, feeling profoundly out of place. Footsteps sounded behind me. Cale, still in his formal attire, approached. "Brooding does not become you." "I am not brooding. I am appreciating the view." He stepped closer. "You are a terrible liar. Speak." I sighed, the cold air sharp in my lungs. I heard the talk of consorts. It made me ponder my utility, or lack thereof. His jaw tightened. For a moment he said nothing. Then he grasped my hand. "Change your clothes. We are going out." "Out? Where?" He did not answer, leading me through a hidden passage. We swapped our finery for plain woolen cloaks and emerged into the vibrant city streets. Lanterns glowed like captured stars. The air smelled of roasted nuts and mulled cider. Laughter and music poured from every corner. My gloom began to dissipate in the lively chaos. "Do not stumble," Cale said, tightening his grip on my hand as I nearly tripped over a toy cart. "It would be worth it," I declared, my eyes catching on a stall selling intricate paper lanterns. One shaped like a leaping hare glowed with a soft blue light. "Oh, most magnificent emperor," I tugged his sleeve. "Might I have that one?" He snorted, but paid the vendor. "One. That is the extent of your avarice." "Quality supersedes quantity," I said, cradling the lantern. We wandered, his hand firmly around mine. The crowd parted for him instinctively.
We eventually stopped on a stone bridge arching over the frozen river, the city's lights shimmering on the ice below. I hugged myself, feeling profoundly out of place. "Tired already?" he asked, leaning on the parapet beside me. "A little," I admitted. "I may require an imperial carriage, or a piggyback ride." He scoffed, but his eyes were soft. "You are hopeless." "Says the man who dragged me into the cold," I teased. Then, emboldened by the lantern's glow and his nearness, I leaned in and pressed a swift, soft kiss to his cheek. "Thank you for this." He went utterly still. For a terrifying second, I feared I had overstepped. Then he turned, cupped my face in his hands, and kissed me. It was not soft. It was deep, urgent, and thorough, warming me to my core. The lantern bumped between us as I melted into the kiss. When we parted, I was breathless. Well, that was a sufficient thank you, I suppose. He brushed his thumb over my lower lip, his gaze dark. "You began it." "I did," I conceded, grinning foolishly. "A tactical error on my part." The walk back was slow, my energy fading. I halted, leaning against a wall. "I surrender. Carry me, O mighty emperor." He sighed with theatrical exasperation, but turned and crouched. "Climb on, princess." I looped my arms around his neck, the lantern swinging from my hand. He carried me with ease through the lantern-lit streets, his steps steady and sure. I rested my chin on his shoulder. "You did not have to do this, any of it." "You were melancholic," he said, not breaking stride. "I could not have that." "People will think you have a heart, Kale." "Let them wonder." Back in his chambers, he set me down. I placed the hair lantern on a table, where it cast a gentle blue glow. He watched me, his expression unreadable, yet softer than I had ever seen it. "Sleep," he said. "No fainting tomorrow." "No promises," I whispered, crawling into the vast bed. The memory of his kiss burned within me. Something had shifted. We were no longer merely political allies, and for the first time, I was not afraid of what came next. Snow fell softly outside, a silent, relentless blanket. Inside, I was burning. A fever had taken hold, deep and shaking after my foolish venture into the snowy gardens the previous day. My body felt weighted to the bed, my mind adrift. Physicians murmured nearby. Kale sat in a chair pulled to the bedside, his hand clasping mine with a grip that was almost painful. Worry lined his face, etching his features with a harshness I had not seen before. "Do not come too close," I rasped. "You might catch my demise. It would spoil your formidable reputation." He leaned closer, his other hand brushing damp hair from my forehead. "I am not as fragile as you. Conserve your strength." A physician offered a bowl of dark, steaming medicine. The smell was profoundly bitter. I took a sip and gagged, turning my head away. "That is poison," I croaked. Kale's eyes narrowed. He took the bowl, drank a mouthful himself, and before I could react, his lips were on mine. The bitter liquid passed from his mouth to mine, the act so intimate and startling that I swallowed reflexively. He pulled back, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. "Cheating," I managed, my face flaming. "It was effective," he said, setting the bowl aside. "Cease your complaints." The fever made time elastic. Hours bled together. But Kale remained, a constant, solid presence, his hand in mine. When coherence returned, the room was quiet, the snow still falling. He was there, watching me, his guard down. "You should not have stayed," I whispered. "You have an empire." "Empires can wait," he said, his voice low. "You cannot."
My heart clenched. "Careful, Majesty, that borders on sentimentality." "Do not grow accustomed to it," he replied, but his thumb stroked my knuckles. Days later, though still weak, I was upright, swaddled in furs. Kale, now acting as a self-appointed guardian against the cold, announced another excursion.
We climbed the highest tower in the palace, a needle of stone overlooking Valthorn's snow-draped capital. The world below was a pristine, silent painting of white and gray and gold. "It is breathtaking," I said, my breath frosting in the air. "I bring all my troublesome brides here," he said, stepping close. He drew me against his side, his cloak enveloping us both, shielding me from the wind. "What is your verdict on Valthorn now?" "Cold," I said, smiling up at him, "but it has its charms. The scenery is dramatic, the people are resilient." I paused. "You are not what I expected." "And what did you expect?" "A tyrant, a statue of ice." "And now?" I met his gaze. "You are still severe, but there is a warmth. I find I like it." He was quiet for a long moment, looking out over his kingdom. Then his voice dropped, low and earnest. "Elara, will you stay?" "I am here, am I not?" "Not as a princess, not for peace. With me." His hands settled on my waist, drawing me closer, his cloak enveloping us both, shielding me from the wind. "I am weary of ruling alone. In a few years, my cousin's son will be ready. We could leave this cold, find a place by a southern sea, where the air is gentle for your health. Just us." My breath caught. He was offering a future, a real one, beyond duty. "You are serious? You would relinquish the throne?" "I would trade it for a life," he said, his eyes holding mine, unwavering. "Say yes." A shaky laugh escaped me. "You make a compelling proposal, Your Majesty." "I am a skilled negotiator. Do you accept?" I leaned into him, the cold forgotten. "Yes, Kale, I accept." His smile was brilliant and true. He kissed me then, slow and deep, as the snow dusted our hair and shoulders. I pulled back, grinning. "You may regret this when I am coughing in our seaside villa." He brushed the snow from my cheek. "Regret you? Never." Wrapped in his arms, the fever and the fear felt far away. The plot I had fled, the sister I had left behind, they were chapters in another story. This was ours, and it was just beginning. A fragile peace settled over the next few months, woven through with a new and tentative understanding. I was no longer just a political guest in Kale's palace. I was becoming a part of its rhythm. He kept me close, not as a ward, but as a companion. I attended councils, not to speak, but to listen, to learn the map of his mind and the contours of his kingdom. The court watched us, their initial pity or disdain for the sickly foreign princess, slowly shifting to a wary curiosity. My health, while never robust, stabilized under the strict regimen Kale enforced. The palace physicians were competent, and the northern air, though sharp, was clean. I still coughed, still tired easily, but the fainting spells grew fewer. One afternoon, as I practiced calligraphy in the sunlit corner of his study, Kale broke a long silence. "A messenger from Aethelgard arrives tomorrow." My brush stuttered, a blot of ink marring the parchment. I set it down carefully. "From my father?" "From your sister." Celeste. A knot of complicated emotion tightened in my chest. Guilt for leaving her to navigate Silas and the court alone. Affection for the sister who had tried to protect me. Fear of what news she might bring. "Will you see the messenger?" I asked. "I will. You will be at my side." The following day, we received the messenger in a formal receiving chamber. The man bore Celeste's personal seal. He bowed deeply, avoiding my eyes as he presented a sealed letter to Kale. "Her Highness, Princess Celeste, sends her greetings and wishes for her sister's health and happiness. She also sends this for the Princess Elara's eyes alone." He offered a smaller, more delicate scroll. Kale nodded his permission, and I took it, my fingers trembling only slightly. I broke the wax, imprinted with Celeste's favorite lily, and read, "Dearest Elara, I hope this finds you well, or as well as you can be in that frozen fortress. The court whispers that the Wolf Emperor treats you kindly. I pray it is true. Things here are complicated. Silas's ambition grows like a weed, father ages, and the shadows lengthen. Your absence is noted, and not in a favorable light by some.
They call it cowardice. I call it wisdom. I write with a warning, sister. Silas has been making inquiries about Valthorn's military dispositions, about Cale's habits, his weaknesses. He asks subtle questions, cloaked in concern for your well-being. I do not trust his intent. He sees your marriage not as a peace treaty, but as a potential lever. Be watchful, guard yourself, and guard your new husband's trust. I miss you. Be safe. Your sister.
Celeste. The words chilled me more than any Valthorn winter. I looked up to find Cale watching me, his expression unreadable. He dismissed the messenger with a few terse words. "Well?" he asked when we were alone. I handed him the letter. He read it swiftly, his face hardening into the mask of the Emperor, cold, calculating, dangerous. "So," he said, the parchment crackling in his grip, "the Ethelgardian viper still writhes. He thinks to use you." "He thinks to use us," I corrected, a spark of defiant anger cutting through my fear. "I am not a lever to be pulled, Cale, not for him." A slow, predatory smile touched his lips. It was not a gentle expression. "No," he agreed, "you are not, but he must be made to understand that, clearly." A flutter of anxiety joined the anger. "What will you do?" "Nothing overt, not yet." He came to stand before me, tilting my chin up. "But we will stop being a quiet mystery. It is time Valthorn and our neighbors see precisely what you are to me." His plan unfolded with subtle, devastating pageantry. Where before I had been a quiet presence at his side, now I was placed at the center. He consulted me openly in court, not on matters of state, but on cultural exchanges, on the aesthetics of a new public garden, on the translation of an Ethelgardian poem. His tone, while never soft, held a note of deliberate respect. He began to leave his hand on the small of my back during walks, a possessive, steadying touch. The gifts continued: a book of southern botany, a fur-lined hood of exceptional softness, a delicate necklace of sapphires that matched the winter sky. The most significant change was in the evenings. He stopped dismissing me after supper. Instead, he would lead me to his private solar, where we would sit before the fire. Sometimes we read in companionable silence. Sometimes he would tell me of Valthorn's history, his voice a low rumble in the quiet room. Sometimes I would speak of Ethelgard, of Celeste, of my old life, editing out the parts he could never understand. One such night, wrapped in one of his cloaks, I asked the question that had gnawed me since Celeste's letter. "Do you believe me, that I am not a spy for Silas, that I knew nothing of his plans?" He set down his wine goblet and looked at me, the firelight dancing in his dark eyes. "Ilara," he said, his voice utterly serious, "if you were a spy, you would be the most incompetent one in history. You faint at strategic moments, you talk too much, and your face displays every thought that passes through your head." I scowled. "I am not that transparent." "You are." He reached over and brushed a stray lock of hair from my cheek, his calloused fingers surprisingly gentle. "It is one of the things I find least irritating about you. I have lived my life surrounded by masks. Yours is refreshingly absent." His words settled something deep within me. Trust. It was a gift more valuable than any jewel. "What will happen if Silas makes a move?" I whispered. Cale's eyes glinted like chips of obsidian. "Then he will learn why they call me the Wolf of Valthorn, and he will learn that my mate is not to be touched." The word mate hung in the air, primal and final. A shiver that had nothing to do with cold ran through me. Spring came to Valthorn reluctantly, with icy rains and stubborn patches of snow. My health, always a barometer for change, took a slight downturn, a persistent cough returning. Cale's vigilance doubled. The political storm, however, arrived with the first true thaw.
It began with trade disputes along the border, Ethelgardian merchants claiming unfair tariffs, Valthorn border guards reporting provocative patrols. The official missives from King Alistar were polite but firm, carrying Silas's fingerprints in their clever phrasing. Cale's responses were granite. He showed them to me. He is probing, testing my resolve and my attachment to you. He wonders if I would trade a strip of land for peace, or if your presence makes me emotionally negotiable. And are you? I asked, hating the slight quiver in my voice. He looked at me, and there was no emperor in his gaze, only Cale. There is nothing on this earth I would trade for you. Not land, not gold, not peace. He said it as a simple fact, more powerful for its lack of poetry. The final provocation was an invitation to a peace summit to be held in a neutral town on the border. The subtext was clear: come and be pressured, or be seen as the aggressor. You cannot go, I said immediately, the old fear for him a cold fist in my stomach. It's a trap.
Not going is also a trap, he replied, strapping on his vambrances. He was preparing to ride out to review the border legions. It shows fear, and I fear nothing. I fear for you, I admitted, the words raw. He stopped and came to me, cradling my face. I know, but listen to me. I am taking you with me. My eyes widened. To the border? Cale, I'll slow you down. I'll be a liability. You are my strength, he corrected, his thumb stroking my cheek. And you are my statement. I am not hiding my wife away while I deal with her former countrymen. You will stand beside me. Let Silas look upon you and see that you are not his frightened little princess anymore. Let him see you are mine. The journey was arduous, even in a well-sprung carriage surrounded by the elite Imperial Guard. But Cale's determination was a tonic. He rode beside the carriage, a constant, armored presence. At night, in the command tents, he insisted I stay with him, sharing his meals and his warmth. We arrived at the fortified border teep where the summit would be held. Tensions crackled in the air. Aethelgard's banners flew opposite Valthorn's, and there, at the head of the Aethelgardian delegation, stood General Silas. He was just as the book described, handsome in a severe way, with piercing gray eyes and an aura of controlled power. His gaze swept over our party and landed on me, standing beside Cale at the top of the keep steps. A flicker of surprise, then cold assessment passed over his features. The summit itself was a tense dance of words. I sat in a place of honor beside Cale, swathed in Valthorn's colors, saying nothing. I merely watched. I watched Silas try to intimidate, to manipulate, to drive wedges. I watched Cale dismantle every argument with brutal logic and unshakable calm. He was a mountain, and Silas's words were mere gusts of wind. During a recess, Silas cornered me in a secluded arcade overlooking the courtyard. "Ilara," he said, his voice smooth as oil, "you look improved. The northern climate must agree with you more than we anticipated." "General Silas," I replied, keeping my tone neutral, "I am well. Are you?" He took a step closer. "It must be a lonely existence, so far from home, married to a man known for his coldness. Does he treat you kindly, or are you merely a prized trophy on his wall?" Anger, hot and clean, washed through me. I drew myself up, channeling every ounce of the dignity Cale had shown me. "You will speak of my husband with respect," I said, my voice low but clear. "I am not a trophy. I am his wife and the princess of Valthorn. My home is with him. Do not mistake my departure from Aethelgard for weakness. It was the strongest choice I ever made." Silas's eyes narrowed. The charming mask slipped, revealing the ruthless ambition beneath. "Strong choices have consequences, princess. Your father is not well. Celeste is struggling. Your place was there, with your family, not here playing bride to a warlord." Before I could retort, a shadow fell over us. Cale stood in the archway, his presence like a sudden drop in temperature. He did not raise his voice.
"You are addressing my consort, General. You will step back." Silas held his ground for a defiant second, but the sheer, silent force of Cale's glare was overwhelming. He inclined his head, a stiff, minimal gesture, and retreated. Cale came to me, his hand finding the small of my back. "Are you unharmed?" "I am," I said, leaning into his touch, my heart still pounding. I told him. I heard. A hint of fierce pride warmed his eyes. "You were magnificent." That night, in our chambers, the tension finally broke. Cale was a storm of controlled fury, pacing before the fire. "He dares," he growled. "He dares to approach you, to question you, to threaten you in my own stronghold." "He has no power here," I said, trying to soothe him. "His very breath is an insult." Cale stopped pacing and looked at me, his gaze burning. "I will end this, tomorrow." The next morning, at the final session of the summit, Cale did not negotiate. He issued an ultimatum. He laid out evidence of the provocative patrols, the trade manipulations, all traced back to Silas's command. His voice was the crack of ice on a frozen lake. "General Silas," Cale concluded, his eyes pinning the man across the table, "you have one cycle of the moon to withdraw your forces to the agreed borders and cease your intrigues. If so much as a single Aethelgardian arrow crosses the line after that, I will not consider it a border skirmish. I will consider it an act of war, and I will not stop at pushing you back. I will come for you." The silence in the hall was absolute. King Alistair's representatives paled. Silas's face was a stone, but a muscle twitched in his jaw. Cale stood, and I stood with him. "The summit is concluded." He didn't wait for a response. He took my hand and led me from the hall, his stride long and sure, leaving a room full of stunned silence behind us.
As we walked back to our quarters, the spring sun breaking through the clouds, I squeezed his hand. "You were terrifying." "Good," he said, but then he glanced down at me, the Emperor fading, leaving only the man. "Did I frighten you?" "No," I answered honestly. "You made me feel safe." He brought my hand to his lips and kissed my knuckles, a gesture so tender it stole my breath. The wolf of Valthorn had bared his teeth to the world, and in doing so had shown me his heart. We returned to the capital not to peace, but to a watchful, waiting quiet. Kael's ultimatum hung over the continent like a drawn sword. I threw myself into the small, steady rhythms of life, overseeing the palace herb gardens, corresponding with Celeste, whose letters grew more grateful and less anxious, and learning the intricate melodies of Valthorn's lute. Kael was often buried in military preparations, but he always made time. Our evenings in the solar were sacred. One such night, a few days before the moon's deadline, I was struggling with a complex stitch in my embroidery when he spoke from his chair by the fire. "The scouts report movement. Silas is pulling his troops back." I looked up, the needle frozen in my hand. "He's complying?" "It appears so." Kyle's expression was satisfied, but not surprised. "He is ambitious, not suicidal. He tested the ice, found it too thin to bear his weight, and retreated." A profound wave of relief washed over me, so intense it made me lightheaded. The specter of war, of being the catalyst for violence between my old home and my new one, began to recede. "It's over, then?" "This gambit is over," he corrected gently. "He will scheme again in other ways, but his belief that he could use you to manipulate me is shattered. That is a victory." He stood and came to kneel before my chair, taking the clumsy embroidery from my hands and setting it aside. He took both of my hands in his. "Ilara, the world is full of shadows and schemes. My life has been spent navigating them. I never sought a partner in that darkness. I sought only to bear its weight alone." He paused, his thumbs stroking my palms. "But you brought a stubborn, coughing, entirely inconvenient light into it. You made me want more than just to rule and survive. You made me want to live." Tears pricked my eyes. "Kael," he continued, his voice deepening with an emotion that made my heart ache. I meant what I said on the tower. The crown is heavy, and this palace is cold. My heir is readying in the wings. In a year, perhaps 2, we can leave this all behind. There's a villa on the southern coast, surrounded by lemon groves, where the sea is the color of your eyes. Say you will come with me, not as a princess fulfilling a duty, but as my wife, my partner, my love. The word love, spoken aloud by him, was more devastating than any declaration of war. It was a truth I had felt growing for months, but hearing it named by this fierce, guarded man shattered me in the best way. Yes, I whispered, the tears finally spilling over. 1,000 times yes, to the villa, to the sea, to anywhere, as long as it's with you. He smiled then, a true, unguarded smile that transformed his face and pulled me from the chair into his arms. He held me tightly, my face buried against his neck, as if he could absorb me into his very being. Then it is a promise, a future, our future. The moon's cycle ended without incident. The border grew quiet. Official word came from Aethelgard. King Alistair, perhaps finally shaking off Silas's influence, reaffirmed the peace treaty and sent wishes for my continued health and happiness. Life did not become a simple fairy tale. I still took my tonics, Kyle still had endless emperor's work, but the air had changed. The love we had confessed was not a fragile thing. It was the foundation upon which we built our days. It was in the way he would automatically reach for my hand when we walked. It was in the way I learned to prepare his favorite tea exactly as he liked it. It was in the fierce protectiveness that now lived in my own heart when I saw the weight of the crown on his brow. One evening, nearly a year after the border summit, it was summer now, the sunset painting the sky in hues of peach and lavender. Kyle stood behind me, his arms wrapped around my waist, his chin resting on my head. The council agrees. My cousin's son will assume the regency in the spring. The transition will take a year. Then, we are free. I leaned back against him, contentment a warm glow in my chest. The villa by the sea? The villa by the sea, he confirmed, pressing a kiss to my temple. With a library for you, and a study with a terrible view for me so I am not distracted from looking at you. I laughed, the sound easy and clear. I think I can survive that. He turned me in his arms to face him. The last of the sun gilded his features. You survived a plot meant to kill you. You survived the journey here. You survived me. I have no doubt you will survive a life of leisure, princess. It wasn't just survival, Kyle, I said, reaching up to touch his face. It was a beginning. The cannon fodder princess and the reincarnated heroine's story was never mine. This is ours.
He kissed me then, under the vast, darkening sky, with the kingdom we would soon leave spread out below us. It was a kiss of promise, of a journey ending and another, sweeter one, about to begin. It was a kiss that held no fear, no political calculation, only the simple, profound truth we had forged together. In the end, I, Ilara, the girl who was meant to be a forgotten casualty in someone else's story, had not just rewritten my fate. I had found a love as solid as mountains and as endless as the southern sea, and that was a better tale than any I had ever read.